Oh, hold on 1 second. I'm getting a really bad echo. Let me. Okay, Chair Clow,
Present.
Vice Chair Eaton Lawrence, Member Mirando,
Present.
Member Smith.
You can follow me on Blue Sky and Instagram at Joyanne Reed and on TikTok at Joy Reid Official. And do follow our show accounts on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue
Member
Sky
Smith,
at The
if you
Readout.
can turn down your TV, it's coming through.
Starts now.
Member Reland and Sasha will not be in.
8 days, Andrea, after being nominated, is dropping out.
Tonight, a stunning early defeat for the Trump Vance.
Okay,
The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Reland. Next, we go to the approval of the agenda. Does staff have any changes to the agenda?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we'd like to move staff communication up after approval of the minutes, because I don't think we have any findings.
Just 2 minutes.
After the minutes. And for that, we have just an update on the general plan and an update on the code, and then I'll introduce something else.
Motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Roll call.
Give me 1 second. Chair Clow.
I don't.
Get you a vote. Vice Chair Lawrence,
Yes.
Member Mirando,
Yes.
Member Smith,
Yes.
Member Wieland,
Yes.
and that's it.
Next, we'll move to the approval of the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Roll call.
Member Lawrence,
Yes.
Member Mirando,
Yes.
Member Smith,
Yes.
Member Wieland,
Yes.
motion carries.
And now we'll move to approval of minutes. The first minutes are the October 3rd, 2024 minutes. Changes by staff or any commissioners?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Oh, and no changes from staff. Sorry.
Member Lawrence,
Yes.
Member Mirando,
Yes.
Member Smith,
Yes.
Member Wieland. Motion carries.
Next, we will address the minutes of October 17th, 2024. Are there any changes by commissioners or staff?
No changes by staff.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
Member Lawrence,
Yes.
Member Mirando,
Yes.
Member Smith,
Yes.
Member Wieland.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to staff communications.
We have just a couple updates. Danielle Alvarado is going to give a quick update on where the code updates are. And then Janice Bricknikoff will give a quick update where the general plan is. And then I'll advise you as to when our new member will start and who she is.
Hello, everyone. Chair Lawrence tonight and members of the commission. I was still Chair Cloud. I was told you were chairing, but just sitting differently. Okay, no worries.
It's because I have a cold and I.
Oh, I see. That makes more sense now. Okay, Chair Cloud, members of the commission. Good to see you all. I just wanted to give you guys an update on where we are with the adoption of the Phase 1 draft for the Land Development Code. From the last time we came here, there's been some changes from our timeline. As you know, we've been working diligently to try to get it adopted by 2024, the end of 2024, because of various issues that we've talked about in the past, mostly just due to needing more time to review and making sure that we really have a reviewed and rounded document. We've decided to go ahead and just push the adoption date till after the holidays because of how few governing body and hearing opportunities there are between now and the end of the year. So with that in mind, we're now looking at introducing the document in January, early January, with the goal of getting it adopted in February or early March. So just some caveats on that. There's not going to be any further changes to the draft. Right now, it's being internally reviewed by our staff that need to review the entire document before it can go into an ordinance, basically. So we're working on drafting that ordinance, reviewing it, and we should be done with our staff internal review by mid-December with the, again, the goal of having that.
Okay, I'm here now.
Okay, somebody's online. With the goal of having that introduced at the earliest opportunity in January at governing body. So let's see. We will have a draft available with with some changes that were made between the draft that you saw last, which was the one that you provided a recommendation to proceed at our last meeting, or our last meeting that we talked about the code update. And that draft will have track changes. Most of the changes are just further improvements to language, updating cross references. However, there are those additions of the historic code, the archaeological code, which were the outstanding parts of the draft that were still being drafted at that time. So that's, again, one of the reasons why we've pushed this introduction date so that we could incorporate all of those changes and make sure that they work with the rest of the draft. So in terms of the schedule for 2025, we don't have all the dates quite lined up yet, but we have a rough idea of how that's going to work and what the order of operations are. So quickly, I'll just go through them so you understand and the public understands what is to come and what opportunities there are for public comment and also your recommendation. So the first milestone, of course, is going to be introducing it at the governing body. Again, we hope to have that done in early January at the first available meeting. There's no public comment at the introduction. There's just the brief introduction by the sponsors, and then it goes into the public record, the ordinance. Then there has to be a first public comment at governing body, which will be at the next available governing body meeting. And of course, that would be the best or the first opportunity to do public comment for all of our working groups, the members of the public, anybody who wishes to speak, basically. And then it goes to all of the advisory boards. This is per governing body internal policy in terms of how they structure the adoption of an ordinance like this. In this case, the advisory boards include yourself, Planning Commission, as well as the Historic Design Review Board and the Archaeological Review Board, all of which are code-required recommendations on any changes to their respective sections of Chapter 14. So this time around, it won't be like a recommendation to proceed. It'll be a recommendation to adopt of the actual ordinance as written. So again, we hope to have, at that point, we'll be looking at probably the first Planning Commission meeting in February for that recommendation date. assuming everything goes well with the first two meetings at governing body. And then after it's been gone through the advisory boards, then it has to go to the standing committees, which are the governing body committees. That includes Public Works and Utilities, Finance and Quality of Life. Luckily, they all tend to meet around the same time, so we should be able to knock them out all within a week or so. Assuming that we get positive recommendations at least one of those hearings, we have to get one positive recommendation before we can move forward to a final action at governing body. And then that recommendation has to happen 2 weeks before the hearing. I'm being very pedantic about it because this is, important that we get this right, and I want everybody to understand like the steps that are coming, because that's part of the reason why we've decided to push this time frame in the first place. But anyway, assuming all that goes well, we'll have that final action at governing body for a vote probably in late February, early March. So that's what I have for you. Like I said, there are not going to be any further changes from staff. Any further changes that may come are going to come from the governing body. Obviously, in your recommendation, you may recommend an amendment if that is your prerogative. But once it's introduced, it is an ordinance, and then from there, the only changes that are made are through amendments by the governing body. As we've talked before, there probably will be some language, some enabling language to allow staff to make further changes as we codify the draft after it's been adopted, in terms of things like formatting or typos, things that slip through the review process because it's such a big document. But again, that won't include any further substantive changes. That's all I have for you. Any questions? Okay. Well, thank you, and I'll hopefully see you in February.
Thank you, Daniel.
Good evening. Janice Boletnikoff with the Land Use Department. I am the project manager for the general plan update, and I'd like to take this opportunity to reintroduce this project to you and also to update you as to where we stand right now. So the general plan update is the revision of the 1999 general plan, which set a 20-year vision for the city. Much has changed since then, and we're revising the vision to match today's constituency and today's issues. General plan does not in itself carry the weight of law, but it is essential in that it creates the foundation for the regulations in the Land Development Code, or LDC, which is the law. Without an established direction and goals, these regulations would be less effective in shaping Santa Fe in a way that reflects the community. The funding allocation or contract value of this project is $1.75 million. This covers the general plan document update, including revised text, maps, and graphics, as well as the digital platform project, which will be developed to serve our public engagement efforts during the planning process, but also will be maintained as an ongoing GIS-based informational resource for the community into the future. Basically, this will be an information hub for property data, land development entitlements, and all things planning. A plan of this scope involves a long planning process. Project completion is currently estimated at December of 2027. That said, we're very happy to have recently commenced work in August 2024 when Land Use received the purchase order and notice to proceed for our consultant WSP. On August 27th of this year, we did the general plan update kickoff, but on October 15th and 16th, we had an on-site kickoff with our consultants WSP. They conducted a tour of Santa Fe, meetings with city staff from the GIS and communications departments, as well as the mayor and our consultant for the LDC update, Clarion Associates, who were also in town at that time. We'll be coordinating our efforts between these two projects on phase 2 of the LDC update in order to increase efficiency and preserve funds for both budgets. The communications framework between the city and WSP was established in early fall, and we've been holding ongoing technical meetings with them since then on both the plan and the digital platform. WSP is determining the city's current GIS capacities and our needs, as well as establishing important study parameters for the general plan. The consultant has been gathering reports and resources as they've worked on the first deliverable, the draft assessment report. This will establish the baseline data for all components of the general plan and let us know what has been achieved or missed from the 1999 general plan goals. The next step is finalizing our communications plan and the public engagement plan. Public engagement efforts may begin as soon as January 2025 with our initial scoping process. We're currently assembling our Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC, and this will include local industry professionals as advisors and community ambassadors throughout the general plan process. We've completed the charter for this group and are actively recruiting candidates for this group. A press release for the project is coming next month. This will include the project website and ways for the public to get involved. So we ask that everybody stay tuned. Thank you.
Any questions? Commissioner Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair Kyle. Ms. Blipnikoff, I was wondering about any involvement, reporting, engagement of the Planning Commission specifically that's envisioned process. Can you speak to that at all at this point?
We envision that it'll be largely the same as the LDC update. So we'll be bringing that first deliverable to you, the draft assessment report. And we haven't quite yet determined the check-in points aside from the deliverables with this entity.
Thank you. I would only maybe encourage, based on prior conversations of the Planning Commission, that I believe the members are interested in having regular updates. People, I think, who were not involved in the committees felt like maybe they didn't have enough information during the phase 1 process. I'd only convey that observation for the future work.
Thank you. And I do believe I remember our director mentioning that we'll be bringing at least monthly updates to you.
Great.
Thank you.
And I think it'd be helpful to have study sessions as we go too, so that it's not one big massive document that we're dealing with at the last minute.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other
Sure,
comments?
Bob.
Commissioner Smith?
Yes, I would just like to ask, to help me understand how the LDC and what you're talking about align with each other, how in sequence or side by side, and how they inform each other, just to keep me alert to that. Thank you.
This projects are on different tracks, but parallel tracks. Typically, what would happen is a general plan update would take place, and then the LDC update would take place after that. For a multitude of reasons, we are doing it in the opposite direction this time, and the LDC update commenced with phase 1 and clarifying corrections and conflicts within the code, essentially what Daniel has described as the low-hanging fruit, and a cleanup of the code first before phase 2, which is the larger lift that includes big changes to our chapter 14. That's where the general plan update will meet up with that project, in that the scoping can be combined with the public regarding the general plan updates goals, which is to find out what the vision of the community is now and where they want to be in 20 years. And also scoping for the LDC update, asking what's wrong with our current regulations and how can we fix these to better serve you and to get to that vision of where you want to be in 20 years. So we will be having some of our meetings together. Our consultants are currently strategizing how to avoid participation burnout, committee burnout, and to keep the two projects distinct as far as our branding goes, so that people know which one they're commenting on and what each one is for. But we will be having some meetings that are separate. So some meetings will be hosting both projects and trying to get information from people for both needs, and some will be distinct. In phase 3, the projects will also be together. Dan can speak with a little bit more detail about the LDC in phase 3, but phase 3 for where the general plan meets up is the draft. I believe it's the draft at that point will be what we're making sure syncs up with the draft regulations that have been recommended in the LDC. So by then we have a really good idea of what the community wants and where we want to head. And we can make sure that there's no disconnect between that and the draft new regulations.
Heather, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair Clow. So with reference to, this process, it's going to be a lot of work over the next couple of years. One of the things that we have determined with the consultant is that the horizon year is going to be 2050, because by the time this gets adopted, we'll be closer to, 2030 than we will be to 20, well, instead of it being a traditional 20-year process, so it would be 2045, we figured 2050 would be more appropriate. And it also gets people thinking even a little bit more long-term in terms of how we're going to view Santa Fe, as a community in 2050. So a lot of the discussions will be surrounding that horizon year, but informed by the data and analysis that the consultant will be providing to us as part of that assessment report. You may recall that the Planning Commission also sort of targeted some folks for being leading the policy subcommittee with the general plan, and we will be resuming those policy subcommittee meetings. One of the ideas that I thought might be helpful is we do have some folks who are involved with the policy subcommittee, and then maybe some other commissioners could be involved or attend the advisory committee meetings so that we have good coverage but not have a problem with quorum in those cases. So it might be something that the chair and the commission may want to entertain. So the other sort of update relative to the two projects and how they will interact, an idea that was brought forward by Matt Goebel with Clarion Associates is having actually a phase 2A and a phase 2B of the land development code update, so that it will we will be able to adopt things more quickly instead of having to wait for a year and a half for code updates to go into place. Plus, it'll be a little more digestible because we'll be dealing with these key issues. And then, having smaller adoptions along the way will help to implement code changes that we think are important faster, but also just better for the public to be able to understand the issues that are at hand and, not have a huge book thrown at them all at once. So those are some of the strategies that we're using, and certainly we'll be in touch with you about the subcommittee, the policy subcommittee, and getting underway with that group as well.
Thank you. I'd like to strongly second what the vice chair and chair said before about the briefings and the updates to both of you. It's just critically important that we be brought along, whether we're on the policy committee or not, in my estimation. But thank you very much.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Wieland?
Thank you, Chair. One thing that was brought to my attention is that staff is going to have a interpretation of code with local builders and architects. Will you guys provide those to us as well? Because I think that'll help us clarity of where we're headed as a city also when we're sitting up here making judgments.
Go ahead, Heather.
Oh, thank you, Chair Clow. Didn't want to speak out of turn. Yes, thank you, Commissioner Reland. So we met with the Land Use Working Group of the Home Builders Association, that it also includes American Institute of Architects members as well. And the focus that we had was on the Green Building Code. And there's currently an update that is being studied and proposed by the city. And so we worked primarily with that yesterday. But there are a lot of issues, a code cannot be one size fits all. So we are working together with this group. I think the focus initially will be on building code issues, not necessarily land development code issues, but we will report out to you what the policies are that are related both to the land development code as well as to the international building code interpretations. So there are just unique situations. And we are also going to be working on creating a process booklet. We've asked for some funds so that it's clear to the development community and the community at large what the process is for a development project. So you can either pick it up for a large development project at the beginning when you have a pre-application meeting with the current planning staff, or you can look at for if, say, I want to build a deck, right? The honeydew project in the summer is, the process and how that will be laid out as well. So we're trying to make the whole land use planning process a little more user friendly. It can be daunting. So those are the two major initiatives we are working on with the land use working group. And I'm grateful for their willingness to help us out in that project.
Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll move on. Dan, you want to talk about the new commissioner?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we do have a new planning commissioner filling the at-large position, which was, I think, Commissioner, well, it was Phil's position. And she will be starting on December, from what I hear. Piper Capon is the new commissioner. She has actually been on the commission before. I don't know if any of you have worked with her. She's very good, very diligent. So she's going to be fun. Welcome member to the team.
Thank you. So there's no old business. We'll move on to new business and we'll call case number 2024-8650 Fiesta. I'm sorry, that's been postponed till December. It helps if I put my glasses on. We'll call case number 2023-7752 400 and 4200 Beckner Road preliminary serial subdivision plat.
Thank you. Good evening. Janice Boletnikoff with the Land Use Department. The case I have for you this evening is a preliminary serial subdivision plat located at 4000 and 4200 Beckner Road. The case number is 2023-7752. The agent is Orion West LLC. The applicants are Santa Fe Los Solares Medical Development LLC, Los Solares Center LLC, and Los Solares Village LLC. Case planner is myself. You will have noticed that in the title of, or in the case name for this docket, it's not just a preliminary subdivision plat, but a preliminary serial subdivision plat. So I thought it prudent to remind everybody what the difference is. Chapter 14 states that except for re-subdivisions, a proposed subdivision that occurs within 5 years after the approval of an earlier subdivision of any part of the affected land shall be subject to the same standards and shall follow the same procedures, as though the cumulative number of lots created by the successive plats were created by the currently proposed subdivision. So essentially what this is saying is that it is a cumulative assessment and it's comprehensive of all old and new lots because they will have been divided within the last 5 years. That said, it's important to remind everybody that this is a full subdivision process. So this requires conformance with Chapter 14, Article 9, which is our infrastructure design standards. And this includes possibly bonding for all the completion of all infrastructure and amenities that would be necessary for the standalone operation of each phase. So as opposed to an administrative lot split, this is a full subdivision process with all infrastructure included. The location of the property is in the Los Solares master plan area, and you can see I have it highlighted here in blue. The Los Solares master plan, of which this is a part, was approved in 2018 and was originally tract 18. The legal lot of record that was provided by the applicant was established in 2022 when this was subdivided into tracts 18A and 18B, hence the serial subdivision requirement. And this is the proposed preliminary serial subdivision plat in its entirety. So it includes all land that was part of that 2022 split. But you'll see here in the next slide, zoomed in tracts 18B1 through B5 only is where more of the detail is happening. I'll explain more about that later, but I have highlighted here in red 18B2, which currently houses the Nexus Health Medical Office Building. It's fully developed at this time. There's an illustration of the internal roads to serve the proposed lots. And a summary of the proposal. The request is to divide 2 existing lots into a total of 6 lots for a commercial subdivision. The existing lots are 18A at 29.82 acres and 18B at 18.01 acres. Tract 18B2 is developed with the Nexus Health Building. That was approved through Development Plan Case 2022-5621. This will be a phased project. Phase 2 includes the development of Tract 18A, the larger, which is why I had zoomed in on the more detailed, smaller 18B. So 18A will remain undivided at this time, and lot 18B will be divided into the following 5 lots. You'll see they have varying sizes located here in this table. There will be 2 access points off of Beckner Road. The internal roads will be lot access drives. That's a road typology, and they will be dedicated to the city. The traffic impact study that was submitted with the application anticipates no significant changes in traffic from this subdivision. There will be 26-foot easements provided for fire access throughout the subdivision. 8-inch water and sewer lines will be provided throughout, and easements for dry utilities. A public trail will be constructed along the southern boundary of the subdivision. This will be parallel to the highway, roughly. 25% open space is required for this request, or it could be reduced to 20% with passive water harvesting. Individual review will be required for each of the lots as they apply for building permits or development plans, because no development is included with this application or anticipated at this time. This is subdivision of the land only. At the time of development for each of those lots, various things will be required as per usual: traffic studies and plans for parking, lighting, landscaping, signage, architecture, etc. The ENN and public notice requirements for the code have been met here. The ENN took place on November 27th of 2023, and the sign is visible on site and was posted and mailed as required by code. I won't go through each of the criteria. They are in full text in your report. Generally speaking, staff finds that the request can meet all of the required criteria if the conditions of approval and the technical corrections in Table 1 and attachments A and B are met. I will mention a few criteria of note here. Criterion 3 is notable here because there isn't a lot of development that's being proposed with this subdivision. It is strictly just the subdivision. So it is still required, however, to comply with the requirements of Chapter 14, Article 9, which dictate the infrastructure design improvements and dedication standard. Much of the infrastructure is included here in the plans that you've received and has been reviewed by each of the pertinent agencies on our DRT referral list. But I will note, though, that some of the elements that would typically be required, such as drainage locations and parking areas, have been allowed to be delayed until those lots are developed and the most appropriate siting for parking areas and the like should be determined at that time. So they normally would be allowed, but they are being put off at this time with the approval of the city agencies. The current request does not create any nonconformity or intensify any nonconformity with either Chapter 14, as noted in Criterion 4, or as noted in Criterion 5, any other city regulations or requirements. The conditions of approval have been received by our DRT agencies. Generally speaking, they fall into two categories. They are requirements related to utilities and infrastructure, so technical specifications and requirements of each division, and requirements for items that need to be shown in full on the final plat. Also, let's see, let's go to the next one. Sorry. Also, we're requiring as a condition of approval that the technical corrections all be addressed by the final plat. So that pulls them into condition of approval status. Here I have highlighted the first of the technical corrections because you have received in front of you, commissioners, a hard copy of a revised entry. Originally, the MPO had submitted their comments on time, but since then, they have worked with the applicant and made a few slight revisions to their requirements for conditions of approval, technical corrections, and a note. Let me go to that next. I wanted to call this out. Also that since it was a late submittal, that also will be attached to the minutes for these proceedings. So this revision strikes the first technical correction and it replaces it with a more clarified version that states the western access lane should have a 5-foot sidewalk that continues to the southern multi-use trail prior to public hearing. I have that shown here on, there's a little map excerpt there showing that that is directly west of Nexus Health, just south of Beckner. They also added a new note, the crosswalk and wayfinding from tract 18B5 to the 18B2 sidewalk network. That's a technical correction, basically stating that 18B5, which is the southeasternmost lot that's proposed, will have a crosswalk connecting it to the Nexus Health Medical Building. One motion is required for this docket, and this is to approve or deny case 2023-7752, 4000 and 4200 Beckner Road preliminary serial subdivision plat, subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff. The recommendation is that land use staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve case 2023-7752, 4000 and 4200 Beckner Road preliminary serial subdivision plat, subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections. With that, I'm available for any questions you may have on this docket.
Any questions of staff? Commissioner Smith?
Yes, just a clarification, going back to criteria 3, when I was reading through this material, it wasn't clear to me, and then hearing what you said today, who pays for the deferred, the requirements that have been deferred? Is it the initial developer who's making this proposal, or is it the people who take subdivision A and develop that?
Madam Chair, that's probably a better answer. That's better answered by the applicant, since that's probably going to be a negotiated discussion between the buyer and the seller.
But I think the main point is someone's going to be paying for it.
That's right. It won't be the city.
And
I
it
would
will be
also,
it will be a negotiation. I'm just interested in how it all goes. That's all I need to know.
I would like to add that we do have members of some of the members from the DRT. We have Dee Beingestner on Zoom. We have Leah Yingwei, who is representing the MPO, and then in the back we have our traffic. So if you have any questions, those are the 3 DRT members that we have with us tonight.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to the applicant.
If you will raise your right hand, state your name and address for the record. Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the pains of perjury?
Brian Nenninger, 2213 Suite 800, Santa Fe, New Mexico, with Orion West, and yes, I do.
Madam Chair, the applicant sworn in.
Okay, Chair Clow, Commissioners, thank you very much for your time, and also thank to Janice for her efforts and work. Her staff report was very thorough, so mine is going to be short. Put this on slideshow. Okay, so I think everybody knows where we're at. I'm just going to go ahead and hit the next slide. The green obviously indicates what we're talking about here. And to the left, we have 4200 Beckner, which is the current Nexus Health Center. And to the right, we have 4000 Beckner, which is the other parcel, 18A, which is in the future phase. Just a couple of just quick items to hit, and that is all these parcels are currently C2 in a C2 district, and nothing about this subdivision changes that. So we're not talking about changes in uses or anything of that type here. The subdivision, as Janice noted, does happen in 2 phases. And much of what's going on in phase 1 in terms of access improvements is already built. Drives, sidewalks, and trails. There are a few exceptions to that I'll go over in a second, but it's been already built with the current medical office building. Just a little bit of an update. We do have or are proposing, what happened? There we go. We are proposing that tract 18B5 will be for an outpatient surgery center. So we're looking very seriously at that, and we'll have more on that. But as Janice noted, that will require a building permit. And, you know, so these are going to be a development plan or a building permit, depending on the requirements and what's being built. The subdivision does provide ample space for open space. So we're not doing anything different there. And utility easements for both the wet and the dry utilities are provided as required by city code here. So this is just an overview. And so we see phase 2. And again, as Janice did, I'm going to blow up what we're focused on here. So if we're looking at tract 18B5, this back corner, cursor is showing up. But 18B5 in the bottom right is where we were talking about the ambulatory surgery center. There are easements on either side of 18B4 that get utilities, both wet and dry, to 18B5. And the same thing is true for tract 18B1. Either side, the wet utilities are on the inside and the electric, dry, and gas utilities are on the outside, so that 18B3 will have access to utilities. The other thing that I'd like to note is that per MPO requirements and conditions, we are extending sidewalks all the way down to meet the trail where we can, and along 18B3, that means a sidewalk from Beckner Road on the the west side, all the way down to the trail. Okay, just a last slide. We agree to the technical conditions and the conditions for approval that were put forth, with a couple of quick clarifications. And Janice covered the first one, and that is the DRT memo by MPO dated October 8th was superseded by a memo that was revised November 12th. And she covered that in her presentation. So we're fine with that. The second thing that I'd like to clarify is that, and it could be that Dee Geisner can help us with that, we would like between this hearing, the preliminary plat approval, and the final plat, to just clarify the dedications that we're talking about with the access drives. We're not exactly clear to the extent and the scope of that. We're not necessarily opposed to it. We just want to understand the scope of that. And that's a clarification that can easily happen between now and the final plat. And with that, I stand for questions.
I have a question. So what is staff's position on the reserving? That's his second point.
Janice Boletnikoff, Land Use. This is the first that we've heard of that request. I would ask the city attorney's office if that is a right that can be reserved through this, or if the conditions of approval and technical condition or technical corrections stand as.
Thank you, Chair Cloud. Could you restate the question?
Well, there's a technical correction that they're taking issue with, that they want to. So I don't exactly understand either what they're trying to do. So if we could have it explained a little bit more and then hear what staff has to say about that.
I think that, thank you, Chair Cloud. I think that we can change a technical correction here today if the commission feels like it has enough information to do that. I guess my concern is, I don't know if we have the right DRT members online to consider that. So maybe we wanted to see.
I
And
think we need to have it developed a little bit more.
Chair Clapp, if I may, and Janice, I can kind of go through what I'm discussing. We look at this drawing, and this is an access drawing that shows all of the access drives, fire lanes, and ways of getting to and from the new parcels that have been created. These drives, and again, my cursor is not wanting to work. Well, there it is. Nice. Maybe against the gray background. So the drives that I'm tracing, this front drive through a parking lot, this back drive also through a parking lot, part of this side drive all the way up to here through a parking lot is what I'm questioning would be a dedicated right of way, whether the city engineer would even want to have that as a city maintained dedicated right of way. It's an open question. What we understand is that when this east-west connector goes in, and that will be subject to the Los Solares Junction project next door, that will mandate that there's some improvements made just for the short little stretch from the roundabout into that driveway. And so it's feasible that there's an area here that would be a dedicated right-of-way in the interest of the city, just like this portion right here is a dedicated right-of-way. The intensity of use, it's probably going to be difficult to even get to the level of sub-collector, the east-west drive. But we're not necessarily, I guess my point is that we don't have a strong disagreement. We just want to understand what's really being asked for with this between now and the final plat. And I think possibly Dee Beingeisner could speak to that, but Janice, you might as well. Thank you.
I'd like to give Ms. Beingessner the opportunity to speak. I believe she's online right now.
Okay, go ahead, Dee.
Yeah. Yes, I am. So I guess commissioners and chair, I am not quite clear. Are you saying that you don't want the east-west driveway to be public right-of-way? Is that what you're saying?
It's not public right-of-way, it's dedicated right-of-way. And maybe that's a good distinction. All of these, I think, should be public right-of-way. Everything in gray needs to be public right-of-way. And we are not arguing that point at all. The question is, when it's dedicated right-of-way, as we understand it, then the city of Santa Fe owns it and maintains it and is responsible for that. And I don't think, Dee, that that was what you had in mind with your comments. That's my only point of clarification.
Okay. So, and I guess right-of-way does usually mean that the city owns it. So I think the term would be not dedicated, just it would be an easement, public easement versus dedicated public right-of-way. I don't have an opinion on whether or not that should be a dedicated city right-of-way versus just a public easement for access. I mean, it definitely has to be a public easement. But I don't know that it would have to be public right-of-way. You know, there's a lot of what ifs. We don't know what is going to be developed to that, that road will connect to. So it might be something where there might be an opportunity, if necessary, to dedicate it to the city. But I don't have a problem with it being private as long as there's public access, no matter what.
And what I would offer to respond is that when we look at this east-west connector and this connection to the roundabout, I think that could be something that we would be open to that being dedicated right away if that was the right thing to do in the future based on traffic and where things developed. Right now, if we look at the master plan, the only dedicated road that we show to the west of this drive is the Rail Runner Loop Road, which is in the master plan as a dedicated road. We certainly believe and support and think that these need to be have public access easements, but that's just a distinction that we want to do what's in the best interest of the city in this case.
So how do we frame this? What's city's position on this?
Madam Chair, if I may, the hardest thing to deal with in a subdivision is understanding what the subdivision regulations are requiring. Now, within the subdivision regulations, all new roads have to be dedicated to the city. That is stated within 14.9 in the infrastructure section of chapter 14. However, there have been many roads that have been dedicated for public use but remain in the private sector. So I think it's just a matter of coming up with a proper affidavit for the subdivision plat that both the city and the applicant can live with, and that the planning commission can adopt as part of the subdivision. I would recommend that this portion of the discussion be moved until we hit the final plat so that staff, since we haven't had a chance to discuss this item, staff has the ability to discuss it properly, including with our legal department, so that we get the right wording in place. I think to do it tonight as a surprise would be unfair to us to come up with any kind of solution right off the cuff.
So we're talking about just that one portion of the road that we would say that would be finally addressed in the final plat, subdivision plat.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, yes, that would work.
Okay, so when a motion's made, we'll address that and figure out the language on that in terms of describing that area specifically enough.
Madam Chair, we can change that condition now just to address, and to be completed by, we can make that just instead of prior to final plat, we can just make it as part of the final plat, and that should satisfy that.
What condition is that?
Madam Chair, was this even in the documents that were presented to us from staff?
This was not.
Okay, so then why are we hearing this?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, because it's a public hearing and he's got concerns on some of the conditions. If it's not a condition of approval, then it's not something that you can add to it as a commission, you can add a condition that says to frame a condition relevant to the ownership and use of that particular roadway to be addressed at the final plat. If it's not a condition, we can make one. And that way we don't have to have a very long, drawn out, confusing discussion that hasn't got all the facts in place, but we can postpone it to address those needs at a final plat through a condition. And that's how I would recommend.
So is it in any of these conditions? I'm not seeing it.
Madam Chair, it
Yes.
is not in any of the conditions. The default is, as Dan correctly stated, that all roads are required to be dedicated in this subdivision process. And so I would like to ask Dan if the default is just to leave it as the code requires at this time. And then if something should become different than the default requirement, we can address it at final plat.
That's also an option if the commission wishes to entertain that too. I can come up with a condition off the cuff, or you can entertain it this way as well.
I think it's probably better if staff is okay with making it a condition that it would not happen until final plat. I think that's probably clearer than we know it's an issue that is going to be addressed then, as opposed to a couple years from now, as saying, well, wait a minute, why are you bringing this up now? So just for, I think, the record, it's probably better to make it as an additional condition.
Then I would recommend that dedication statements be addressed during the final plat process and leave it at that.
On the whole roads or just that one section?
Just make it simple on the entire subdivision.
Okay. That's okay with staff and it's okay with the applicant, correct?
Chair Clow and members of the commission, we are okay with that.
That would be a new condition 11. Okay. Any other questions or comments before we open this up to comment? Okay, we'll now open this matter up to public comment. If there's anyone present in the chamber that would like to make a comment on this application, please come forward. You need to be sworn in.
Excuse me. Oh, yes.
Raise your right hand. State your name and address for the record.
H.B. Bennett, 4718 Las Plazuelas, Santa Fe.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have referenced to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Go ahead and proceed.
Commissioners and staff, my critique, I'm coming this evening for a couple of reasons. One is a critique of the process of notification for our neighborhood and all neighbors in any cases, but in ours in particular. Because as you read in the report, or you can read in the report, there were no citizens or homeowners present last year on 2023. And that's, as I've been able to, I'm a fairly new homeowner, probably one of the newest, but as we've gathered as a neighborhood team to sort out our concerns, we realized that no one really knew about these meetings, at least enough to know that they should come, or that it was that important. And so I'm not looking to change what has occurred in this particular case, but to bring it to the attention of the commissioners, because you're the only body that's before me at this time. And I'm acting as a citizen to implore you to develop some means by which our citizens and residents and homeowners can more effectively communicate their concerns and desires and their affirmations, which I will tonight. Because in a small neighborhood gathering recently, these have been voiced time and time again in over 100 homes that I and a small team of canvassers have knocked on the doors of. In every single case, they're concerned that they did not know. And I know that there are codes about these things. I know nothing about those codes other than what thankfully a developer has helped me to understand. But these seem to be bare minimums. I have yet to receive the notification for this meeting tonight. And I'm one of the newest homeowners, and I'm immediately adjacent to the lot on the west side of this concern. So I come both with just a feeling of powerlessness, but also coming with a sense of gratitude for what our developers have been doing. They're locals. We've met with them now because of our concerns. We've been trying to figure out how do we get engaged in the conversation. And so we've done that largely by word of mouth and petitions. A petition will go to the Governance Council next month in this entire subdivision, rezoning and widening of Beckner Road concern. And so we're We're trying to get engaged in so-called in the game of conversation about these matters, of which we frankly don't know little. When I opened up the 323-page document tonight, I can tell you I was overwhelmed, but every single person in our neighbor team that read it online or saw it in our emails was overwhelmed. They just didn't know what to do with it all, because this is at the end of a process that we've known very little about. And so that's my first concern. I think to our neighborhood team's credit, over the past month or two, the Homeowners Association Board has made a statement in this regard, but also concerned homeowners are making attempts to negotiate in good faith with the developer, Ryan Manager, and the investors of Orion West. And we're grateful for their willingness to meet with us and continue that relationship. But that doesn't negate the city's part in all of this and the code parts that probably are just left unchecked because they've quote unquote worked, you know. But for a homeowner that spent a great deal of money in the past few years to live in a very peaceful, quiet community and surrounding neighborhood, these concerns are real to us. And so I bring finally three quick observations or concerns. One is the height of the new buildings. While 3 stories is or plus is it's appropriate in the context of this code, we believe it to be too high in general for our peaceful neighborhood and its single home subdivisions that are immediately adjacent in the Estancias de las Saleras. I can't speak for the new Horton subdivision, but it's already rapidly growing. And so they will have similar concerns once they're on board. The neighbors are, secondly, the neighbors are surprised to see a retail donut and coffee shop on this proposed plot that's here. That's immediately out my back door on the other side of Beckner. And primarily, that was the concern. It came out of our understanding that primarily retail was going to be focused in the Las Saleras Junction proposed the proposal that's been before you and is going to go to Governance Council next month, I understand. We're just concerned that retail even be in this particular subdivision, and also especially with the ingress and egress issues that were already identified by the staff in the documents that you were provided, and I was as well. I'm just bringing that up to as a hope that you will address, or the staff will address, these concerns, the ability to get into this plot that you're looking at in order to go to our drive-through or a sit-down coffee shop or something like that that's yet, you know, codified. I just hope that you'll look at that. And then finally, there's this planned unsignalized access road that was referred to tonight and in your documents. Off Beckner Road, driveway A will provide a second access parallel to the existing walking lane entrance on the east side. So this will be on the east side of the Nexus Health. And even with the proposed alteration of Beckner to allow for the right-hand deceleration and right-hand acceleration lanes, which are in the proposal, this traffic flow will be challenging at best with the excessive posted speed limit of 45 miles an hour on Beckner. Our neighborhoods generally have been just dumbfounded by where in the world did 45 miles per hour come for a 2-lane road that's not complete and doesn't have signalized entrances or exits to, or they have an exit now to Richards Road. And that's my final comment. And I want to thank you for your work. I know it's hard work and our time working together on these kinds of matters.
Thank you. Anyone else in the public present here like to make a comment? If not, we'll move to Zoom. Is there anyone on Zoom that wants to comment?
Madam Chair, there are 2 people in Zoom. We will start with a Joan Dickinson, Dickerson, and I have allowed Mr. Mr. Dickerson to talk. You may unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes,
I do have to speak, I do have to swear you in, so
Yes, I understand.
if there's any way I can take a look at you so I can see you raising your right hand, that'd be awesome.
I don't see a way to share my video. But I can assure you that my hand is raised.
All right. Go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Joan Dickerson, 4721 Las Plazuelas.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
Yes, I do.
Madam Chair is sworn in.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, we have had a number of talks with the developers, and we greatly appreciate that and believe that they are trying their best to be good neighbors. I do have concern about the proposed coffee donut shop, primarily based in the traffic that it would draw to the traffic circle at Walking Rain and Beckner. I'm concerned that in peak periods, first in the morning, that we would have some traffic backup in that area, and I think that should be considered. But I understand that you will be considering that in a separate meeting later on when that development is proposed. I did want to state my support for the ambulatory surgical center. I think it's something that's needed in this city. It will reduce healthcare costs for people. It will reduce the amount insurance has to pay for ambulatory surgery. I think it's a good thing, good idea. Recommend when it comes before you that that's approved. But I do have concerns about the traffic situation. I do have concerns about the right in, right out eastern access. Even with an acceleration and deceleration lanes, that's going to be very difficult to do a merge onto Beckner when the posted speed limit is 45 miles per hour. And that concludes my comments.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we have one more identified as Gary and Lori. And I have unmuted you. Please unmute yourself so you can be sworn in.
Good evening. I also have my camera uncovered, but I don't know that I can share my video like Joan could not also. So I've got my hand raised. My right hand is raised.
Okay, if you will please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Gary Laswell, and I live at 4713 Las Plazuelas, Santa Fe.
Do you solemnly declare and affirm that the testimony you have in reference to this item shall be the truth and nothing but the truth, and do this under the penalties of perjury?
I do.
Madam Chair, you've been sworn in.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I just want to go ahead and affirm and lend my support to the comments that Joan Dickerson made and that Brad Bennett made. I am a neighbor of both of those individuals, and we've been working diligently to try to work with the developer on how this development is going to unfold. And so I support the comments of both Brad and Joan. But I also wanted to raise again the question about Beckner Road. I know that this is a point of contention for us because we believe that ultimately Beckner Road is going to be slated for widening. I did look at the traffic impact study that is in the attachment, the 323-page document. Beckner is considered, I believe it's called a minor urban corridor. It has a posted speed limit of 45 miles per hour. That is entirely too fast as this development begins to unfold. We already have people racing through the roundabouts at 45 miles per hour, and they're going down the street much faster than that. As we start to add more development on these parcels and more ingress and egress points, the traffic speed is going to become even more of a concern. That, in fact, I was noticing that traveling down St. Francis Boulevard and Cerritos, some of those sections of those streets aren't even 45 mile per hour postings. So I did note in the attachment mentioned in the traffic impact study that there was a statement there, and I don't remember who made that statement, but it was something to the effect that it makes no sense for Beckner to be a 45 mile per hour posted corridor. It needs to be 35, probably no more than 35. And I would strongly encourage the staff to make that a condition as we move forward with the development of this entire area. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else on Zoom?
Madam Chair, I do not see any further hands.
And so we'll close the public comment portion, and I'll open this up to the commission for questions or comments. Commissioner Lawrence?
Thank you, Chair Clow. I wanted to comment about the public comment we had, that I thought that there were a number of very good comments that I think, some of which will hopefully be addressed in the ongoing general plan and land use code work, particularly about notification and comment and reaching out to the neighbors. I wanted to ask the applicant, given that there has been some ongoing communication, if you might be willing to respond to any of those concerns on behalf of your client.
Chair Clow, Commissioner Lawrence, thank you for the opportunity for that. So one of the clarifications I think worth making is that when we put together a subdivision like this, and because it is a serial subdivision and it has the requirements that Dan and Janice had referred to earlier around infrastructure, we have to do a traffic study. And in order to do a traffic study that has any meaning, we have to make some assumptions about things we don't know. And what we don't know, for example, when we started this process, what the uses would be on the out parcels, the parcels that are not developed, because we're just really trying to subdivide land, not define the uses. I mean, we know the uses that are allowed in a C2 district. So in this particular case, the coffee shop, because of the connector, the east-west connector, and the size of the lot, it just lent itself to something of that size in our efforts to do a traffic study. So being in the sort of retail and commercial and hotel business over the year, and also thinking about what Commissioner Reland has warned us about before with regard to retail, we do think that F&B, food and beverage, coffee shops, pastry shops make sense somewhere in this area. Honestly, if it's this corner, it would surprise me if that's where we end up. But again, we had to come up with some assumptions to get a viable traffic study. So hopefully that will address that concern. I very much appreciate the Las Estancias neighborhood and the neighbors and the conversations that we've had. What we've tried to do is we've got an email chain going now, and we are updating the neighborhood of things that are happening, not only with the subdivision, but what's also going on next door in Las Solares Junction, so that we can kind of keep these conversations going. And it would be my intent to send out an email probably tomorrow and kind of clarify what's going on with that coffee shop and why that was what it was. We really don't know what will end up on that corner is the truth. So, and then the final comment, of course, somebody raised it, is that there will be another opportunity, of course, with all of these developments to comment. There may be one exception to that, and that is, and I'll tell you what that is. I see some raised eyebrows appropriately. The ambulatory surgery center happens to be of a size that's less than 30,000 feet, and it's also 200 feet away from, if we put it in the lot that I discussed earlier from a neighborhood, that can go straight to permit. Just to put everybody's mind at ease, that's a 1-story, 18,000 plus minus square foot building, if it does move forward as we think it will. One last thing, it does require traffic studies. It will require a water plan, all the things that you're used to seeing. It just goes straight to permit for that review by staff. Thank you.
I don't at this point.
Any other questions or comments?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I think the attorney wants to say something and I'd like to comment on. Some of the references that came out today were what's going to the governing body in December. This case is not going to be going to the governing body in December. This case will have to come back to the Planning Commission for a final plat, which we have yet to schedule. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this particular case, 6-lot subdivision, will not be presented December 11th for the governing body.
And thanks, Dan, for reading my mind. Chair Clow, may I address the commission briefly? Thank you, Chair Clow. I just wanted to mention, when the applicant was speaking just now, I didn't hear him. I'm sorry if I missed it, Mr. Nanninger, but I didn't hear him offer any testimony about notice. It sounded like the a community member that offered public comment may have been raising some questions about whether notice was adequate in this case. And so it may be helpful for the record to elicit some testimony from the applicant about whether they affected notice properly and what they did to affect that notice.
I think that's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, Commissioners, Chair Clow. So we followed the process that the city has in place for notice, both posting signs and sending out the mailers. And of course, for this particular type of applicant or application, you have to do a notice within 300 feet. We get those addresses and information right from the county. The county draws the line. They give us the addresses. It's a pretty straightforward process. We double check addresses to make sure if it's a current resident or somebody that's remote. If they're ownership and there's a current resident, both get a mailer. And we've sent all of those mailers and all that information to staff. When we post, it's a picture of the sign on the day and timestamp that it goes up. We also file and fill out an affidavit that says we've notified the homeowners association. We've sent out all the appropriate mailings. There's a whole checklist, and we send that back into the city, and we've done that in each case. One of the things that the city, we've tried to help in this case is update, and we did this early on, is that they have the right homeowner association contact information, because in this case, they did not. We corrected that ourselves, and I can show that and prove that. I've got the emails. So, and now, because of these concerns, and we very much appreciate the neighbors' concerns, we're doing an additional step, even outside of the process. If anything changes, we're notifying neighbors. And one example is that we know now that the December 11th governing body hearing is going to be delayed, as far as we know. And if it's not, we're going to jump up and down for joy, but our understanding is that I will stop. If it's not delayed, I don't have to send out an email. If it is delayed, you'll see one tomorrow. But we understand from the last 2 days.
I'm not sure you're talking about this case right here, or you're talking about another case in
I'm
general?
talking about the December case you were talking about with the rezoning that's going to governing body.
I was talking about this case particularly. We can talk about that particular case after this meeting, but for this particular serial subdivision, you are not scheduled for the December 11th governing body, because a serial subdivision stops at the Planning Commission authority, and unless the governing body pulls it up or there's an appeal. Outside of this, you're still at the preliminary state for this serial subdivision. You will have to apply for a final application for the serial subdivision that comes back to the Planning Commission. It does not go to the governing body.
Yeah, all those things we understand. Sorry, Dan, when you were talking about the 11th and referring to what some of the neighbors' concerns were, I thought you were talking about that as well. I understand.
Oh, we're just talking about this case.
And we've turned in that final plat application, by the way. So we'll wait for you guys to look at it and tell us what to do.
Madam Chair, if I can further clarify some of the notice requirements. When dealing with public notice, there are several requirements that an applicant has to perform to get to
Well, at least
public hearing.
you got the attention. Project.
But they're just
asserting themselves, it doesn't.
So the first is you have to notice, well, there are two things that happen together. You have to post the property. The posting of the property comes by a big yellow poster. Those go at every private or public right of way. So in this sense, there's typically only one because it's off Beckner Road, maybe I-25. So that could have been required 2 signs. And that has to happen 15 days prior to the public hearing. The second one is a mailing. That mailing goes by first class mail to the owner of the property and to the property itself. So if you have an owner living in New York City, that owner will get a first class mail. But if they're renting their property here, that person will also get a first class mailing. So there's 2 mailings that go out to one address, the owner and the tenant. The second requirement is that if there is a neighborhood association that is within that 300-foot radius, and I don't have another word for radius because sometimes it's an amoeba looking area because the lot is not square, but everybody within that range will get sent a letter, and the homeowners association, if they're registered with the city, the president will get a letter and the president will get an email of the upcoming case. So you have a poster, you have first class mailing, you got a letter to the homeowners association president if they're registered, and an email to the homeowners association president. That allows the homeowner president to disperse the information out to their neighborhood association. And then finally, we have a publication in the newspaper of the agenda, and we post that agenda also on the city webpage. So you have several forms of notice before an applicant can hit this particular meeting date. The required notices are the poster, the mailings, and the emails, and the agenda. The city webpage is added onto that. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that there's an extensive notice that goes out for every application that comes before the planning commission. And for rezonings within that first 100 feet of that 300-foot area, they have to go out by certified mail return receipts requested. So there's an extensive notice that the ordinance tries to capture for every application that comes to a public hearing.
Thank you, Dan. Entertain a motion?
Madam Chair, I will make a motion to approve case 2023-7752, the 4,000 and 4,200 Beckner Road preliminary serial subdivision plat, subject to the conditions of approval and technical corrections recommended by staff, with the new condition that dedication statements shall be addressed during the final plat process, and with reference to this meeting record for more information on that new condition.
Second.
Roll call.
Vice Chair Lawrence,
Yes.
Member Mirando,
Yes.
Member Smith,
Yes.
And Member Reland.
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion carries.
So the final thing on the agenda is any matters for commission?
Madam Chair, if I might add one more thing that I forgot.
Yes. Have-
Notice to the property owners for mailers. The applicant is only required to send those notices based on the records of the county treasurer's office. And since this is a self-rendering state, if you don't go and change it at the assessor's office, you're not going to get anything when they run their tally of who to mail. So that's the only caveat. If you have a new person who just moved into the city and they didn't change their tax records, it's going to go to the previous person.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if I could just follow up on staff's comment there on the notices.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. I can say firsthand, when you put out those notices, they get returned to you, right? When they're not addressed to the current owner anymore. On an average application, I would say I get at least 10 back. If it's an application where there are a lot of neighbors within the 300 feet, it's even more than that. I don't know if something can be done about it not working off of the county's list, because it's a really common complaint at E&Ns that, oh, I'm a neighbor, I'm within 100 feet, why didn't I get anything? And we by the letter of the law have to go off of that list, or applicants, I should say, have to go off of that list. I can't say that I know of a better way to go about it, but it certainly comes up a lot.
I think it's something that can be looked at in the second phase of the code rewrite to see if there's maybe a more streamlined, effective way of doing it.
There's also been some writing about just doing neighborhood meetings on simply a distance, that it doesn't necessarily reflect public interest on what's happening. It's really not possible to just say to an applicant, oh, you have to physically notice everyone, but if there was more digital formats for the noticing, the range of noticing could be much larger. Yeah.
Any other comments? If not, yes, Commissioner Smith.
Just as a note, I thought the comments, driving Beckner Road because I get medical services on a regular basis. I don't know where and I waited until after the vote, and that may be inappropriate, and I apologize. But I think the speed limit is something that does need to be taken into account, because it isn't about a traffic study. It's about the ultimate, when the second parcel is developed, there will be egress and access out of there, right, whatever it'll be. But I think that's just a concern that somebody ought to be taking note.
And I'm assuming when there is a traffic study, that will be taken into account. If there's nothing else, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.
You will.